Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. For your returning listener, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, we're really glad you joined us. You picked a great first episode. If this is your first episode, we have an outstanding guest on today. Her name is Helen Glanville. She has written a book called Second Chances, and she runs a charity also called Second Chances. Helen's story is very unique. She married a very prominent white collar criminal who was 20 years older than her and spent 40 plus years of her life building a family with him. And Second Chances is about their story, his story, in terms of what he did and what the life they built after he got out of prison. And the Second Chances charity that she runs works with people that are coming out of the Australian penal system, and especially kids who are impacted by family members in the Australian penal system. And she is just a great storyteller. She's got a great energy about her. She's got a ton of experience, and we just love the way she talks about life and hope and second chances for people. So without further ado, let's bring Helen onto the channel right now. So Helen, thank you so much for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. We love having you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So we had a great conversation a few weeks ago, and I've been very excited to have you on for a variety of reasons. As you know, our podcast encourages people to live a life of meaning and purpose, and the best way we have found to do that is to embrace the difficult things in your life that have taught you lessons and use those lessons as you move forward. And that fits very well in the work that you do and the life that you've led, because like your entire thing is about second chances now. And you'll pick up as soon as Helen starts talking that she is from Australia. And then obviously I'm in the United States, and have been very interested in talking about the differences in the justice system or injustice system, depending on how you want to look at it, between the two countries, because I have been critical of, I think our system is much too lenient on people who need more structure and more rehabilitation, and it's much too harsh on many people who don't. And Helen will get into her story, and it's very personal for her because she married her husband while he was in prison. And she runs a charity now called Second Chance. She's written a book called Second Chance, and just really interested in having you talk through all those subjects and having you share that with our audience. So what we usually do is have you just start and talk about your life. How did you start out and how did you wind up where you're at in very broad strokes? And then we can go back and have deep dives and touch on things that are super important and topics that are super important after you kind of paint the bigger picture. So the floor is yours. Tell us all about your journey.
Well, my journey really started when I fell in love with a criminal, a man I wanted nothing to do with. I'd read the headlines. I was in my late teens, and I had made a decision that I wanted nothing to do with this man. He'd took a one-way ticket to Rio to escape the pressures of all the things he'd done wrong. He'd abandoned his family and children. He had a mistress on the side. There wasn't anything about him that morally I liked or appreciated until, and this is the deal breaker, my father had a dream. And my father's dream was that if I had lost all my friends, my station in life, I'd lost all my wealth, I'd lost my respect and my place in the community, and my wife divorced me while I was overseas, I'd like to think that somebody, somewhere, would give me a second chance. Now, I thought he was crazy. I thought, what's going on here? Jeff was our family lawyer, whom I had never met until my father's dream. I mean, the police came around and told him he was an idiot. You know, he's going to be a flight risk. Don't help this guy. But my father was determined. The bail was set at $50,000 in 75. Now we're talking 50 years ago, so it's a bit of money. The family home was worth $54,000, and both my parents signed off on surrendering, potentially putting at risk our family home, of which I'm the eldest of five. I walk into the police cell. I meet this guy. He's in a pinstripe suit. I'm thinking, what's all this about? Turns out that his ex-wife had provided that for him to look good in court, which was a very kind act. He did look good in court, I suspect. They let him off, and an hour or so later, there we were having a roast at Cole's cafeteria, the four of us. That was our first meal. And then 3 weeks later, he proposes, and I say yes.
So
Well, that's the beginning.
I was going to
Beginning
say,
of my journey, and then I learned, of course, we learned about the criminal justice system because, about 15 months later, he went to court. He was on bail. He went to court and he was sentenced. And then, of course, there was a lot of follow up and visitation to some pretty horrible prisons, and then eventually to a low security prison, and things just improved slightly. One has to be madly in love to hold on for 5 years for someone. And 2 years down track, we decided the time was right to marry because he didn't want me to be the focus of media attention. He knew what his wife and his girlfriend had been through. He knew that I would be a major target. You see, in my research, I found 62 newspaper articles in that 2 year period. And I've listed them in the appendix of the book just to show the evidence that this guy was headlines. Well, for Australia, he was the biggest white-collar criminal of the 70s. And he was good. He was good material as far as the media was concerned. In fact, I conjured up a thought that I figure that really Rupert Murdoch made his fortune from Richard Jeffrey Glanville headlines.
oh yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I bet.
yeah. So then I had finished my nursing training. I became a registered nurse in New South Wales, and we thought that was a good time. And fortunately, he was no longer hot in the media sense. Things had died down a little, so we took the opportunity, and nobody leaked the event from the prison because, of course, if you're going to get sign a contract of any sort while you're in prison, you need permission of the governor. And so he went and got that permission. We hired Rent a Crowd. We had 20 of our friends who drove a couple of hours from Sydney up to Newcastle because at the time a divorcee couldn't be married in the Anglican Diocese of Sydney. They wouldn't marry divorcees then. So, but the Newcastle Diocese would. So we just had to cross the diocese border and get into the Newcastle Diocese. And it was a beautiful day. It was lovely. I thought all the photographs were destroyed in the fire 5 years ago, but just last December, I found them because my brother had collected them all from my mother, and there they were. So it was a beautiful day, and we did everything like you would normally do, except I had to drive him back to the prison by 6 o'clock at night. So it was a one-day wedding and honeymoon.
So there's so much there. I want to go back and ask some questions just to illustrate the whole situation to our audience before we dig into your book. And I also want to talk about your experience with the bushfire, because if folks remember those terrible bushfires in Australia several years ago, Helen and her family lost their property in those bushfires. So I want to talk to you about that whole experience as well. But your dad did not know your husband at all when this whole thing started out. Did they have a previous relationship, or did he just notice that?
Oh, yes. No. He knew Jeff. He
Okay.
knew Jeff. He was the family lawyer. He had used Jeff as the lawyer for several things. For example, my chin. at 14, I was involved in a car accident and my chin needed plastic surgery. And therefore, there was a claim to the insurance company.
Mm.
Again, I had never met the family lawyer, and my father was asked by him for a photograph of my chin. So he takes the photograph of my chin into the court and argues that this girl's prospects of being married are severely reduced because of the damage to this chin. And 6 years later, he finally sees the chin. And that's an interesting little story, don't you think? He managed in the day to get $2,000, which was something. You know, the insurance land have a price on every digit in your hand.
That's right.
If you lose a limb, it's worth X amount.
Yep.
But my face, Jeff argued that my prospects for marriage were severely reduced. So $2,000 later went into a trust account, which was then available to me when I was 21, which happened to be a year after I'd met Jeff.
Enjoying the fruits of his own labor, right?
Yeah, that's it.
And there's a big age difference between you and Jeff, is there not?
Yes, 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm 4 years older than his eldest daughter from his first marriage. But we didn't feel any different. I think we had a mindset which was similar, willing to take chances, calculated risk. You know, we've always got to calculate how much risk we're willing to take. We were adventurous. We both had, I know this is pretty personal, but we both had a pretty high sex level, and
Yep.
it matched. And I think that we were also spiritual. So physical, spiritual, emotional, mental, when all those departments line up, I think you have a match made in heaven. And the way he entered my life, the speed at which
Like, that's a huge point of contention in some relationships when one is way more interested in physical intimacy on a much more regular basis than the other one, or one craves physical intimacy much more. It's like if you don't match those things up, that's problematic.
Very,
like it just is.
yeah.
It's right up there with money. You know, if you're going to argue about money, those things break up a lot of relationships when you're not aligned.
Yeah,
on those
exactly.
things.
Alignment is so essential, and we don't assess future potential relationships based on alignment. You know, and that includes politics. I mean, what happens in a marriage when, you know, you go for the Republicans and I go for the Democrats, and then an issue comes up in the morning news, then you're going to have a bit of a feisty kind of argument, one would think. So I think that even your politics have to be aligned to keep the peace.
Or at minimum, you need to be willing to have an open mind and hear both sides. Like, and on the big things, my wife and I align a lot. And, there's a couple of little things. I don't know if they're little or big or whatever. I know my wife is such an awesome person. She may think differently about a particular subject than I do, but so what? Okay. I can learn something from the way she thinks about things. And that's the way I try to approach conversations with people that see the world differently than I do. I don't judge them. I just want to hear what they have to say because it teaches me more stuff and it teaches me to think about things differently. And I think that makes me a better thinker. I think it makes me a better leader. I think it makes me a better person. It helps me grow. But to your point, if it's cats and dogs every time a particular subject comes up with your spouse, that can be problematic over a period of time.
You're right. Yeah.
And I've been married for 32 years, so I've got a lot of water under the bridge with my wife. She's just an awesome lady. So,
and you must be a good, healthy contributor to the package.
I do my best. I'm riding the gravy train. He's going to leave eventually. I'm riding the gravy train until it gets to the final stop. So, Jeff, we talked about this in our previous conversation. His life kind of fell apart through a series of bad decisions when he got under pressure, right? You talk a little bit about how that whole thing transpired, because it's not like he had a violent, terrible past. He made some mistakes for sure, but it wasn't, something that was like super risky to your personal safety or anything like that.
No, correct. So before I met him, while he was a lawyer, we're talking the economy of Australia in the 70s, where we had a Labor Whitlam government and the mint in Canberra just keep making money. It didn't stop. It just kept going 24/7. And the pressures of doing a business, running a business were huge. In some cases, Jeff's interest rates were 24%. Now, when people start talking about 4% today, I think, get over it, you know? Now, I'm not excusing him whatsoever, but he was put in between a rock and a hard place, which forced him to do things he would never normally even consider. He was a very wealthy man in his own right. He was asset rich and cash poor.
Yeah.
And some of us have been there. And
lots of people are there, by the way. That's a very good point to just hit real quick. When you hear someone is worth X, I think people picture bank accounts that have that much cash sitting in them.
Yeah.
Generally, nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
Generally, all that money is tied up in assets, many of which are not super liquid. So even though on paper you're worth a lot, if you've got to fund a trip to the zoo or anything, right? There's not a lot of cash laying around. So sorry to interrupt, but I think that's a really important point.
No, that's fine. In that particular economy, he had difficulty selling anything.
Yeah.
He knew that his assets would cover any borrowings, if you like, that he did from accounts of his clients. Like, he was trusted by his clients to look after and invest their money. And he was very good at it. He would buy up properties and there would be a return on investment. But there's only so much you can up the rents for the tenants, and they can't match the 24% increase. So he had properties he couldn't sell. He just was beside himself. It actually basically put him in a very risky mental position. Now, he did fess up to, he was a treasurer of a private girls' school. It was an Anglican girls' school. He'd be the honorary treasurer for 10 years, and he was able to access some funds. So he borrowed, if you like, 200,000. Now, back in the day, that was a reasonable amount. And he went to the head of the school and confessed and said, "This is what I've done. I will pay it back. I am good for this. I just needed it to survive," because whatever he did, he didn't go out and buy fancy motor cars or fancy boats or new properties for himself. He was just trying to juggle all the interest rates of certain investments and so forth. Anyhow, they didn't honor his request and they went to the police. And it was wrong for him to have done that, of course. But later, down track, the funny thing is, well, it's not funny, it turned out that school had $14 million worth of debt.
Ooh.
And so when a member of the Parents Association came along to investigate, he couldn't understand why they allowed Glanville to be the scapegoat because he was out of the country. Oh, yeah, he did it. But really, that was, and he called it a miserable 200,000 in the light of the 14 million. Now, the books say, and the court says, he went to prison for misappropriation of $700,000, right? Now, there has been, in that same decade, guys that have gone to prison for so much less, but for so much more. We're talking millions and millions. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so $700,000 is under the $1 million mark ratio, but of course $1 million today is nothing to what it was back then. Yep. But even so, his dilemma, of course, was that he was a lawyer. He was seen by the community and by the law fraternity. He had tarnished the reputation of the profession. And that wasn't what it was all about. I mean, looking back, he says he had discussed perhaps leaving law and just being a conveyancer,
Yep.
but he left he left that opportunity, he missed it. So he took a one-way ticket to Rio. And that too was backfired because it attracted a lot of media attention. We Australians have this guy we want stuck in a Brazilian hellhole, for which the Australians wanted an extradition treaty in return. The government wanted Jeff Glanville to be that political pawn so that in the end they would get something out of it. Now, Australia said to Brazil, hold him. Now, holding him did nothing for Jeff, especially for the 14 months he was in, of eating a handful of black beans and rice, and the squalor of being jammed in with 14 other men on the cold concrete floor with a hole in the corner for ablutions. And it was just a tremendous shock. It was a health hazard. Everything about it was horrendous. How he survived mentally, I'll never know. Well, actually, I do. He's a very strong-minded person. And to overcome that, I thought was a credit to him to survive, just to survive.
You said he was there for 40 months, 3.5 years?
14.
14. Okay.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And then when he came back, he was in prison for another 3 or 4 months. And then that's when he got the bail that my father arranged for him,
Yeah.
which gave him the freedom. Now, he then goes to my father and does the dutiful thing and says, I'd like to have your daughter's hand in marriage. And
Thanks for the bail. Now, about Helen.
Thanks for the bail, mate. Yeah, I like your daughter. So my father says, Jeff, I was there to help you. I'm not going to give you my daughter. So he put Jeff back in prison. He withdrew the bail. Jeff jokingly says, oh, I'm probably the only guy that's been to prison for kissing a girl, So he ended up back in prison, but they then, because he was proving to the system he wasn't a flight risk, he was attending the police station morning and night. He was dutiful. He was determined. He wanted to just face the music. He's done his crime. He wanted to do the time. And but his cousin came forward and they reduced the bail to $35,000. And she then was able to get him out. And then for the next 12 months, we got to know each other a bit better. I went to do my nursing training. He was sentenced in April 1977. It was a very harsh sentence. It was 14 years on the top and 6 years on the bottom. Now, I don't know if any of the top and bottom stuff means anything to you, but if he was not an exemplary prisoner, they would have forced him to serve the whole 14 years on top of his Brazilian experience. But he was a white-collar, trusted prisoner. He did everything by the book. He didn't get himself into trouble. He ran with the right crowd inside. And he was trusted. And so then when he moved to a low-security prison, there in New South Wales, they gave prisoners 1 day a month off. You could be released for 1 day. And that was the day that we chose to marry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you marry someone in prison. They're kind of not in prison. They're kind of come out for the day. So there was a lot of planning went into that. It was 6 weeks after I had finished my nursing training and everything. I mean, it's amazing what you can organize in 6 weeks.
That's such, I can just picture this, everybody looking at their watch on the ceremony. We got to get Jeff back to jail by 6. So we got to speed up the vows a little bit.
Well, we had enough time to have a delightful lunch in a restaurant together, with our guests. I think that finished around about 2. And they then went home.
And so, what did you learn about the prison system? Well, through Jeff's experience and your marriage to him in the prison system in Australia.
Well, I learned it depends on how you play the game and who you befriend. So there clearly are reasonably positioned good prison officers, and there are prison officers who think it's their role to distribute justice.
Mm.
So they're the bullying kind of guys. Jeff didn't encounter that, I think, because he just played it straight. Um, he knew of stories, but he didn't experience anything untoward firsthand. It was reasonable. Is they have a job to do, right? Their job is to make sure this person doesn't escape, make sure this person isn't being rough to anyone else in the system. I think it has a lot to do with the nature of your crime. If you're a policeman and you get locked up with a bunch of,
Ooh.
there's a sense amongst the guys they're going to get, some justice here. So they put those guys in protection. Clearly, it's the same with if a judge goes to prison,
Yeah.
they put them in protection, and rightly so. I think what I've learned over the many years, not just in my personal experience. See, my little Datsun 1600 on my days off knew how to get to Goulburn. That's a very high maximum security yuck 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 prison, right?
Mm.
Where you've got this glass in between you, you can't touch each other. It's really harsh. You're limited. It's very strict on timing. Only one visit per week, and so forth. But when you get to a low security prison, you feel the difference as a visitor. You feel a little more natural, a little more, you can touch, you can hug. And then you've got these sort of tables and chairs, and that's why some people have described it a bit like a picnic area, although I would say it's more a feeling of a university campus.
Yeah, sure.
But it's still imprisonment. I mean, the loss of freedom is the punishment, right? That's enough. Where I come in and what I've observed and heard in South Australian system is the language. I'm very, very concerned about the language of prison officers. Invariably, I've heard the story that somebody's at the gate, it's their day to be released, and a prison officer will say, you'll be back. What hope is in that? That's kind of like cursing someone. The language of throwing at these kids, and I say they're kids because most guys don't grow up till they're 40. They come to their senses. They look back on their life. What have I achieved? And they've got this mindset that I can do anything, whatever I like. They've never had a mentor in their life. I mean, at one point, somebody looked into the situation where 90% of the men had actually been sexually abused as a child.
Mm.
Now, if you've come from a background where you haven't had a strong, responsible male role model, where you lived under a roof where nobody got up in the morning to go to work, so who teaches you work ethic? So these guys, many of them are chronically unemployable. They have very little education. Barely, for some, they can't even write their own name. So they're already on the back foot. Jeff was a lawyer. He had a couple of degrees. He had smarts. He was funny. He knew how to, deal with people. But I think that when somebody's already on the back foot and they haven't had anyone really care about them, and drugs and alcohol are a strong element in their background, they've probably, as a child, seen things that they really shouldn't have seen or know about because of mum and dad's associates. And this is why Jeff and I then turned around and said, look, we're going to see what we can do to break this cycle of crime for the children of prisoners, because they're 7 times more likely to go to prison than any other group in the community. Well, why? Well, where's their role models? What's their associations? Has mum or dad encouraged them to finish their education? Has mum or dad encouraged them to finish their homework? I don't know if you guys do homework over there, but we have homework. Well, I did. You know what I'm you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so there are some mums and dads that don't give a toss if you have truanted. Truanting is the beginning of the downhill slide because their hands are idle. Who are they going to mix with? Oh, a bunch of guys that are running around doing graffiti in the street, or, pulling things over or breaking things or even stealing cars. So we made it our goal to focus on this cohort that were vulnerable because they knew nothing else. They didn't have encouragement to play it straight. They didn't have encouragement to understand that finishing their education would give them a platform from which they could make good decisions for their own
Yep.
lives.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I can't remember where I read this or heard it, but it just kind of floored me. In the United States, at least, if you do these three things, your likelihood of winding up in poverty is below 10%. So if you finish high school, if you don't have children out of wedlock, and you maintain gainful employment, doesn't matter what it is, like whatever, go flip burgers. I'm not denigrating people that work at burger joints. I was a truck washer and a lawnmower in my younger days. Like, I've done shit work. I can
Yeah,
still do shit work. If I got to feed my family, give me a broom, give me a shovel. I don't care what it is.
of
I'll
course.
trade,
Yeah,
I'll work an honest day's work. However, if you just do those three things, it's almost impossible to wind up in poverty. And it doesn't sound like much, but that is so foreign to some people because they don't know anybody who checks all three of those boxes. Like,
yeah,
literally, they have no one in their life that checks all three
correct.
of those boxes.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I was raised in Sydney. I was raised in a blue ribbon liberal seat that was part of the Bible Belt. So, what were my chances of bumping into a family or children that were behind the eight ball?
right.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges I see in the United States. So the rate of recidivism in the United States is 75%. So if someone gets out of jail or prison, they will return within 5 years 75% of the time. They'll go back because they wind up back in the same situations with the same crowds, with the same habits. Because to your point, they haven't developed any skills or coping mechanisms or life skills to not do that. And then we stack the deck against them when they get out, because if you apply for a job, if you try to rent an apartment, if
Yeah,
you do anything in society, one of the questions on there is, have you ever been convicted of a crime? And
yeah,
you can, even if you say no, most people run a background check and it shows up in the public record.
sure.
And we will not give a lot of those people a second chance. And look, some of them haven't earned a second chance. I get that. I know I sound like a bleeding heart. I am anything but a bleeding heart. I am kind of a hard line, hard ass kind of a guy, but I'm also realistic. And if we say that we want people to fly right and be productive members of society, we as a
Yeah,
society have a responsibility to give them the tools and the opportunities to do so. Now, if they fuck that up after we do that, I don't know, that's on you. But to your point, a lot of men in particular don't develop both mentally and emotionally until much later in life. It's hard to get them out of that idiot phase that we all go through. When the
yeah,
testosterone hits at 13, they get stuck there forever. It takes a
yeah,
long time for a lot of guys to get through that. And
yeah,
so I if that's what we say we want, if we want our penal system to be rehabilitative instead of punitive, and I got no problem. Like, I get it. We should punish people for doing bad things. Totally got it. And I put violent crimes in a completely different category. If you're assaulting people or raping people, we need to be very careful about putting you back into society. But the vast majority of the prison population in the United States has nothing to do with those violent crimes. They're
Yeah.
stealing stuff, they're using drugs, they're making bad decisions. That they can be fixed, but we don't do anything to fix
Yeah.
them.
Well, exactly. You would think that the word rehabilitation would actually happen while they have the opportunity behind bars, but the system itself is so busy trying to accommodate, bed space management is the biggest thing. And that's why, unfortunately, you can have two, even some cases, four in the one cell. That in itself is not healthy. I think also that someone who's come out of the juvenile system and who legally has turned 18 is suddenly going into a cell, perhaps with someone who is far more experienced. And we call adult prison the university of crime. That is where you learn more stuff. When you can try and do other stuff. I think, Joe, the acid test for you is, if my son entered the criminal justice system, would he be given a second chance? If my son was in there, would I be there visiting him every weekend? Would I be there giving him hope for a future? Would I be there writing him letters, telling him how much I loved him? And probably, yes. But not every person in prison has a loving, understanding, forgiving, second chances kind of dad. Now, hopefully your son, if you have a son, never, ever, ever goes near the gates. Never, ever, ever goes near the courts. You know what I mean?
I have three of them, by the way. I'm hoping to avoid it. I have three sons, so.
Yeah. But that is the what if question.
Yes.
What if? And you would want a fairness. Sure, do the crime, do the time. Absolutely. But there are always consequences for all our decisions. There are always consequences for every decision we make, and that applies. The biggest problem about that testosterone factor is the thing called, what I call, impetuousness. A guy will be with his mates. Suddenly one silly dude gets a crazy idea to rob this shop, and they form a gang, and he's got a knife and he's got a gun, and let's do it. Oh, now, it's got to be now. It's just sort of that sense of now. And so they get this adrenaline rush and they think, oh, we've got opportunity. Yeah, we're going to do it. And of course they're together, and your son might be in that mix. He didn't really want to be doing it, but because of the pressure from his mates, and we all know that who we choose to be our friends has a huge impact on our future. Who we choose to be our mate in marriage it's one of the biggest decisions ever, is who do we choose, or who chooses us to be, a life mate for the rest of our life. He or she can influence us at every point, at every decision point, our thinking. Your wife influences your thinking, and you know it, right?
I've argued that it's the most important. The person you choose to spend your life with is the most important decision you ever make. More important than career, more important than where you live, more important than all of those things. Because if you get that one right, you've always got someone to work with and who is helping you and believing in you and supporting you. And if you fuck it up, you don't. It's horrible if you don't.
And if you've got that message through to your three sons, you've done society a great favor. Because if they don't mess that decision up and they know what they're looking for, they probably are looking for someone like their mother who has independent thought, who's kind and considerate and not in a hurry, and all of those things which you find attractive. Because, and also the most valuable thing you can do for your boys is to love your wife. Because when they see that dad loves mum, that is the best example for them to know how to treat women with respect. And so often, unfortunately, We have situations where boys and men are being taught to disrespect women. And that's the downhill slide. When that family unit starts to fall apart, that's when society falls apart. And you know who invented the family, don't you?
I don't.
Oh, oh, you wouldn't be surprised to learn that the family is a godly idea.
No, that would have been my guess, but I didn't know that for a fact. That would have been my
Okay.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah, historically, mother, father, children, that's the unit, that's a platform. And if you were to dive into the history of the foundation of your nation, you would find that it's built on solid families.
Oh, for sure. I knew that 100% about
Yeah,
America, for
yeah,
sure. I just knew
yeah.
families
So,
existed long before America existed. So,
yeah, that's true. That's true. It just so happens that God-fearing families are the ones that tend to stay together longer and be a little more rock solid. Things are different today across the board, but that's another story.
well, it's funny because I make that argument a lot. And more than one thing can be true at the same time.
Yes.
So if you are whatever, let's just throw a couple of examples out there. Let's say there's two women that are married, or two men that are married, or a spouse whose mother or father whose spouse has passed away, or they're divorced or whatever. You can do a really good job and you can do raise really good kids. I'm not arguing that in any way, shape, or form. But in a perfect world, there is tremendous amounts of empirical evidence that the best environment for a child to grow up in is with a loving mother and a loving father under one roof. Like, you can dispute that all you want, but the evidence for that argument is overwhelming. And I think we as a society are doing a lot of people a disservice when we are trying to endorse women acting like men and men acting like women.
And
And
yes, and when we encourage single mother families, it's a tough gig. I take my hat off to my girlfriends who, for different circumstances, they've been forced to be single mums, but it hasn't been easy. And, here we are talking about the children of prisoners. Invariably, they are all from one parent family. And that's the struggle. It's a hard gig. My son is currently going through separation for various reasons.
mm,
And it's a horrific situation, but he is acting and becoming like a single dad. His wife is an alcoholic and he is doing a sensational job. He is a nurturer. He is kind. He is thoughtful. He's a planner. Where did he get all that stuff? He got it from his mum and dad,
yeah,
you
that's
know.
right.
And we're dealing with people in prison who've never had any of that. They've never had a loving dad. They've never had a loving mother. They've never had someone to pack their lunch to take to school every day. You know what I'm saying? They've never
Yes.
had a fridge full of food. So when we've done children's camps for the children of prisoners, they see a bowl of fruit and they start shoving it under their jumper and going back into the dorm and hiding it because it may not be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we would say to them, honey, it's okay. You can eat as much fruit as you like. You don't have to stash it under the bed. It'll be here tomorrow. And if you have some fruit today, we will replenish, we will restock. It will be here tomorrow. And that's the survival mode because they haven't seen so much fruit before. That's how ridiculous it is. And to the point that even though we give mum a checklist of how to pack their son or daughter's bag for camp, they wouldn't know what day it was. So when we come to collect them to ensure they get to camp, there's no bag. There's no bag. See, it's foreign to me. The whole thing is foreign because it's irresponsible. And I would never, ever send my boys to a camp without a properly packed bag. Their
Right.
socks and their jocks. And yes, it's a mum thing to do, you know? Who does that? But who doesn't do that? And that's the thing. That's the people we're dealing with. People who, the truth is, and this is my belief, that people who neglect their children really are worshipping what's in their veins, whether it's the drug or the alcohol. That comes first before their children, before their children's welfare. They've got to get their next hit, and that's where the food money's going. They're depriving their children. Now, you and I can't understand that. And we're just basic middle class people wanting to build a family, right? Yeah. It's foreign to me.
When our oldest son was born, we didn't know it at the time, but we were poor. Like we made no money. We had no money. And he was allergic to normal baby formula. So we had to buy, I can't even remember what it was, but it was some special formula. It was like 3 times the price. And so like, if we had to buy formula, there were weeks where we didn't have money for like any money for 2 days. So we would like literally find change in the couch, and you could go to Burger King and get a Whopper for 99 cents. And my wife and I would split a Whopper for dinner until we got money again so that we could go buy ourselves some food, because we certainly weren't going to starve a baby. Like, we made the baby. That's on on us. We have a responsibility there, Yeah. And I don't deserve any sympathy or credit for that situation. It's just simply how it was. But just because you have the capacity to reproduce doesn't mean you have the skills and abilities to take care of your offspring once it arrives in the world. And
but who taught them?
Yeah, that's right.
You can create a child, but who taught them to nurture? Who taught them to be a responsible parent? It's transferred from generation to generation.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with it, is we have a responsibility to help people that didn't get those lessons, so that they do have those lessons and they can start learning and making different choices and become better parents, better people, better families. And we can judge people all we want, but that doesn't get us where we want to be. People that judge do that to make themselves feel better. And I don't understand it, because it's got nothing to do with you. Like, your situation is what it is. Like, if you look at me, I probably have it better than a lot of people, and there's probably other people that have it better than me. And it depends on what it is. I would argue you'd be hard pressed to find someone that's got a better relationship than I do. I think my relationship with my wife is like billionaire status of relationships. Like, how billionaires have just more money than almost anybody else in the world. I think I have a better relationship with my wife than almost anybody else in the world. I think it's top
no,
0.01%.
Well, I'm sorry we topped that. There's no way. Yeah. Our relationship was way above yours, for sure.
But then if you turn it around to whatever, financial, or like there's other places where lots of people make more money than me, right? Got it.
Yeah.
You can't complain or worry about those things. You've got to focus on what's important to you. And even as a little kid, I knew I wanted to be in a good marriage, because my parents fucking hated each other the last 10 years they were married.
Oh, right.
And that has a different impact on different people. But I remember, they would be arguing. They'd send me into my room. I have 3 sisters too, so it wasn't just me, but I'd be in my bedroom listening to them argue. And I remember, like, as an 8-9-year-old kid saying, I'm not going to live like this when I grow up. I'm going to be married to someone I really like, and someone that I get along with, and someone I want to be around.
What a great decision. What a great, because of their negative relationship, you want to go the other way. Actually, that's how I actually went. I didn't like the morbidity. My parents were melancholics. You know what melancholics are?
Yep.
Okay, they've got melons for heads and collies for brains. And so
that was not my definition. I'm glad you squared. I had a different definition.
Well, they like to have self-pity parties. They like to check their navel, and they're party poopers. And I was this precocious, choleric daughter they had no idea how to raise. I mean, I'm the kid at 5 that goes to school, walked there by my mother, and I see all the action and the people, and I'm excited. And I turn to my mother and say, "You can go home now. I'm here. Go."
Sayonara!
Yeah, and she cries. I'm not crying. I'm not crying. I'm in Wonderland, and she's crying her eyes out because of the separation. My daughter is now at school. I was just glad to be there. And anyhow, so we're all different. We're all
Yep.
different personality types, but everything happens in the home. Who taught your boys work ethic? You did. Where did they learn their manners? In the home. Where did
Mhm.
they learn respect for authority? In the home. Where do they learn how to navigate their life and how the value of education? In the home. And so the home is responsible. It's the place where everything is. The first 10 years is our foundation. Now, the first 10 years of my life, my father was cursing me. My father for 10 years said, you'll be a failure. You won't be able to be successful. You'll be this, you'll be that. And it was all negative. He was transferring onto me and my siblings, I've got four, his failure or his disillusionment with where he was in life. And it was every day. It was relentless. And because you're a child, and I loved my father, I thought he was speaking truth. I didn't realize till later it was toxic. But you actually think, oh, okay, Dad said it. It must be right. But I was doing well at school until about 14, and all these things that had entered up here in my head had dropped into my spirit, and I started living it out. I just went to become a flop. And I think the words of a parent upon a child are so powerful. I've heard mothers screaming at kids in the shopping centre, oh, you'll end up in Yatla, which is a prison, just like your old man.
Oh,
Now, what sort of language is that? Where's the hope in that? After a while, you listen to this rubbish for a while, you start to believe it. Yep, I'm
yep.
going to end up in prison like my dad. And that's where I talk, I think, the power of the tongue. Uh, there is a source for this. The source is the Bible, right?
Yep.
Life and death is in the tongue. It's a proverb. There's some good stuff in there. Life and death is in the tongue. You can speak life to your wife. You can speak life to your boys, but you can also speak death. And that's the difference. So how we speak is how we influence others, both in our family and all around us. And if I say to you, Joe, I think you're a fantastic podcaster. I really feel relaxed. I feel like you're bringing the best out of me, and I so appreciate this podcast. You're going to be uplifted, right? You're going to think,
That's right.
oh, yeah. Then if I turn around and say, you're an asshole, I think you're the worst there is. I want nothing more to do with you, you salty ginger person. You know what I mean? So there's a difference, and it has impact, yeah? And,
For
and
sure.
And I apply that to the prison system because these guys, mostly guys are in prison, haven't had a positive male role model in their life. They get into prison and another negative input and all this garbage in, garbage in, garbage in, is being spoken by people in authority. They were already taught to disrespect authority. And there's this uniform telling me I'm the scourge of society and I'll end up coming back. It's just layer upon layer upon layer, and we're not building better men. These boys need to be made into men, and the system doesn't do that.
Yeah. So I learned that lesson that you're talking about through sports. And so I went through college on a baseball scholarship, and it was very obvious early on that I was a good athlete, and in particular, a good baseball player. And so it was all I ever wanted to do was play baseball. And I took it very serious. Like I lifted weights on my own, I trained on my own outside of all the just regular activities. I did my own stuff. But one of the things I learned was there's a difference in how you talk to yourself about your approach. So, just as a little example, I was a pitcher, and instead of saying to yourself, hey, don't throw a ball, what you got to say to yourself is throw a strike. It's the same thing, but it's a very different connotation because one is avoiding a negative and the other one is enforcing a positive. And the more you can enforce a positive, the better off you are. And I mean, that carries through to this day. So like, my wife is super creative. She's a hard worker. She's really tough, but she can be very scatterbrained too. That's part of her creativity is I can be so focused and so driven and so locked in, but I'm not super creative like her. And those both have pros and cons. Not one's not better. They're just different. But she'll do something scatterbrained and she'll go, I screwed this up. I did this or I did that. I always say the same thing to her. You're so pretty. That's all I say. I don't say I can't believe you screwed that. I just say you're so pretty. And like if she wants to get my attention or talk me into doing something, she'll just come up and put a hand on my arm and say, "You're so strong." We both know what's going on. It's been 3 decades, nobody's fooling anybody
It's
at
code.
this point. Yeah, but that positive self-talk, it's such a different way to start a conversation than the negative.
It can diffuse any tension.
Right.
If you can diffuse the high emotional atmosphere in any relationship, you are a game changer. And I think that to just calmly say those pleasant things just brings it. My husband was very good at speaking softly.
Mm,
And there would be tension. He'd be dealing with a former prisoner who was rah, 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 rah. But he would simply stay calm and he would be speaking softly. And I don't think some of these guys have ever had a mature male role model speak to them gently and softly, you know? And I was
yep.
thinking when you told me about you getting the baseball scholarship, that perhaps along the way you had a coach who took you under his wing and mentored you or spoke well to you or valued your contribution to the point that his language and you warmed to him, because we don't really care what people say. It's really how they make us feel,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. Yeah, and I had lots of coaches like that. So it's funny because my dad coached me a lot, and my dad in real life is like the evil little league coach in the movies. My dad's that guy in real life, but he loved that I was good at sports, and he had a tremendous amount of pride of look at how good my son is. That's my son. And that
Yeah,
it mattered to me. I loved it
of
anyways,
course.
but if I didn't have the constitution I had, it probably would have been a difficult environment for me. But I've always been pretty utilitarian where a lot of stuff just rolls off me and I keep chugging forward. But even he was encouraging and said, you can really go somewhere with this. You're a really good player. You could do whatever you want. You're as good as anybody out there. And to hear that reinforced over and over and over again. And I had soccer coaches and basketball coaches that said, I love having you on the team because you're coachable, you bust your ass, you work really hard, and you set a really good example for the rest of the team. So to your point, it was reinforcing those behaviors that were important to me, but even if they're important to you, if you get those shut down, like you're not a very good leader, you should just go sit down over there and let the rest of the guys handle this. At some point, you're going to listen to that, At some point,
Yeah,
you're going to listen to that, like you're talking about.
yeah.
Um, so you
But
you
you
have,
would transfer that to your sons, right?
yeah,
That's what I'm saying. Generation to
that's
generation,
right. That's exactly right.
transferring. Your sons may not play baseball at all. They might have a different gift set. They might be painters or musicians, whatever their gifting. See, your gifting opened doors for you. And that's why we have gifts where they're given to us. That's what gifts are. They're given to us. And, if it's a good gift, like singing, or if it's baseball, whatever the gift is, it
Hmm.
will always open a door. And I think that's really special. So before you were talking about comparing, you're talking about, oh, these people might be richer, these people might be poorer, these people, whatever. I think comparing is a trap.
Yes.
To compare, oh, wow, they drive the latest Mercedes Benz, but that's what I want. To compare is such a trap, and we need to instead count our blessings. You know, I am blessed because I do have a roof over my head. I am blessed there is food on the table. I am blessed because I have two beautiful sons and a granddaughter. Do you know what I'm saying? We're not
Yes.
really appreciating what we do have because that's the reality. Why are we so damn discontent that we've got to compare ourselves with the people next door? Why can't we just be content with the fact that I'm Australian with two arms and two legs? I am blessed. You know, we have a fairly good health system compared to yours. We have a fairly good welfare system compared to yours. I would much rather live in Australia than in the States. But hey, who's comparing?
The only thing I'll say about our healthcare system and our social safety net is it's hard to fall off the floor. So, it doesn't get much worse. The problem we have is there's so much grift and administration in the system, it doesn't do what it's intended to do. My argument around that is it should not run through the government. It should be pushed down to local charities, local not for profits. The distribution of those benefits or the administration of those services through the government is a terribly inefficient way by which to provide help to people that need it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people recognize that, and they're not good people, and they'll try to take advantage of that. And the system is set up so that a lot of people can take advantage of that. And then the healthcare system is entirely about greed. We've just allowed corporations, drug corporations, and insurance providers to commandeer the medical system instead of, like, people always talk about healthcare. It's so hard. It's so hard. It's not hard, because you know what works just fine in the United States? Auto insurance. You know what else works just fine? Home insurance. You know what else works just fine? Life insurance. All of which are administered at the state level, and the government, the federal government, has very little to do with it. The federal government provides tremendous amounts of regulation and oversight on the healthcare system, and it is fucked up 7 ways to Sunday. And that's from my perspective, it's not hard to fix. Deregulate it, push it down to the states, let the market take care of it, and be fixed in 30 days. But we won't do that because there's so much money being made by the people that control it right now. You've got to,
Yeah.
you got to pry their fingers, you can pry the cartel's fingers off of the control levers to take control of it again. That's my opinion. But
Well, the sad part about insurance generally, especially home insurance, car insurance, when you've just come out of prison and you're living a law-abiding life, you're paying your taxes, and all you want to do is insure your home, and they find out you've got a criminal record, they will not give you insurance. And you may have not done anything about property stealing, property damage, or anything like that. You've got no history in that department. But at the moment they ask you, have you got a criminal record? Oh, we don't give insurance to you. Doesn't matter what crime it is. Now, how does anyone get to start a new life, and they've got the money, they're working, they're doing everything right, they're ticking all the boxes, and now they just simply want insurance? Now, I don't know what's going on in your country, but here it's an uphill battle. And that means that they leave their home, they go to work, it's unprotected, you know, and they have no history in that area. Why can't they have insurance? It's just, that doesn't give people a second chance. And that's what it's all about. I've learnt that along the way, that there's these hurdles to people coming back and rehabilitating themselves, because mostly it's a do-it-yourself system. So if you have got a good girlfriend or you have got a good family, you know, Johnny lost his way because he got in the wrong crowd, got onto the drugs. Now he's left that crowd. Now he's off the drugs. We're coming around him as a family and we're going to support him. He's rehabilitated, got in with the right crowd, doing everything right, tax-paying, law-abiding citizen. What are we doing to help him without hindering? Because there are too many obstacles.
yeah,
So that's
look, that's
a second chances. Yeah.
that's a great segue into both the book you wrote called Second Chances and the charity you run called Second Chances. So which one do you want to talk about first?
The charity.
Okay, let's talk about the charity.
Okay, so we founded it 10 years ago. We obviously like the term because it goes all the way back to my father's quote: if I had nothing and no one, I'd like to think somebody somewhere would help me with a second chance. I believe Australia started that way. We started in New South Wales with a bunch of convicts, right? So that
For those who
actually,
don't know, Australia is a penal colony for England. That's where how you got to Australia, right?
yeah, pretty much, yeah. And so they were given their second chance. Well, here's a bit of land, go and turn it over, go and grow some crops, whatever. So that is pretty much an Australian idiom. Yeah, mate, we'll give you a second chance. We'll give you a fair go. Mate, we'll give you a fair go. But only, obviously, if that person is demonstrating the change. We can't just willy-nilly hand it to everyone. No, we've got to be discerning. They've got to prove that they're doing the right thing by the community, by me, by whoever, and they've turned around. It's the turning around that is so, so, so important. And if they have turned their around, they've grown up, they've come to their senses, and they've turned around, yes, we give them a second chance. So we do that for prisoners and their families, and for the last 10 years we've specialised in particular in programs for the children. So that would be Christmas presents, where we provide them and actually take them into the prison at Christmas visiting times. We've got that arrangement with the department. And then birthday presents, so that the imprisoned parent can fill in a form, have it posted, have it to us, and then we represent them. We deliver the birthday present on their birthday to their child. Then there are camps where kids who've all got a parent in prison, they all have the same struggles and difficulties. They think dad doesn't love me anymore, or it was my fault he went to prison. All this false guilt, all this stuff that enters a kid's head, Sure, they love their mum and dad. It might be toxic love. It may not be healthy, but it's the only love they've known, but
Yep.
they love their mum and their dad. They desperately need them. And so we don't always know what goes in the mind of a child, what they're thinking, but we need to still come around them, tell them that they are accepted, they do belong, and they have value. And every human being is craving that, whether we know it or not. You, Joe, need to be accepted. You need to belong. You need to have value, and you get it. You get it in your family. You get it. You might belong to a Rotary club. You might belong to, I don't know, a tennis club. But you see, you only go there not just to play tennis. It isn't just to play, tennis or to be a good Rotarian. It is because you know that you're accepted, you belong, and you have value. And the Hells Angels do the same thing. They just have a different set of values, but they all accept each other. They all feel like they belong. They just have a different set of values. And so you get that going to church, and that's why people move churches so many times. They don't even know why they're moving. They just feel maybe they're not accepted, or maybe they don't belong, or whatever. But they are the three core basic human needs we all have, however we search for it. Yeah. So that's what we try to say to these children, that we accept you, you belong, and you have immense value, and you are enough, and you can make good choices for your own life. So that's essentially the foundation under which all our programs are developed. So that's Second Chances in South
I love
Australia.
it. So you've been at it for 10 years. Do you have like a success story that you could share, or a great experience you could share with the audience to kind of talk about the impact?
Well, one boy, he was only 8. He was miserable. He was so, so sad. He was sad because his mother had some mental health issues. His dad was in prison, and he was raised by his grandmother. And unfortunately, his grandmother died. And she was a source of love for him. And then he was forced then, dad got out of prison, he was then to be with his dad. And it just got terribly complicated, and the influential people in his life kept shifting. But he then made decisions for his own life, and he ended up being a carer in what do you call it, a residential care place for juvenile Aboriginals. And he had he'd grown up very quickly. He did get involved in a youth group in his church, and they surrounded him with love, where he was accepted, belonging, and valued. And he then turned that around to reach out to his own people. He had a heart for his own people, and that was beautiful. And he, to this day, is looked upon as a mature young man, and everybody loves him. He's just gorgeous. I love him. And then we had a girl who was at the time 14. She and her sister, they came to camp, and we were encouraging them both to make good decisions for their own life. And their mother was in prison, and she hadn't been a good mother at all. It was horrific. What the stories that I learnt from their mother was incomprehensible to me. You know, kids raiding the pantry and all they had was raw spaghetti, right? They didn't know how to cook it, and they dipped it in tomato sauce, and they were crunching on this. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, how do you do, there was no adult around. There was
Right.
this pantry. That's all they knew what to do. Anyways, this girl made a decision that she was going to finish her education. She did. She went to year 12. She got accepted into university. And she was the first person ever in her entire family to ever break that, to go through that level higher than anyone else. She is today now head of a dentist practice. She's the group managing. She's delightful. She's a smart girl. She made that decision, and we actually trained her to become a camp leader. So she was looked up to by the other girls because she was an assistant leader. Unfortunately, the sister who attended the same camp when she was 14, she made a different decision. She ran with the wrong friends. She stayed on her drugs, and now her teeth are falling out. She became pregnant, so she's an unmarried mother, single mum, and not doing well at all. She's got no hope for the future, for her own life. And it's a very, very sad, destructive path to see. Two sisters, same camp, same messages, but it's about choices.
Yep.
And it's just a delight to see these young people come through when we've met them at an intersection where they needed us. They needed us to speak value into their life.
That's so cool. And like you talked about, you can show them the path and you can show them the resources, but they've got to do it. Like you can't, my saying is you can't push someone up a ladder. They got to climb.
Correct.
That's how it works. So, but I love that you're getting involved at these inflection points in their life when you can make them look at things a different way and have such a positive impact if they choose to follow that path. What a cool thing to do. That's got to be so rewarding.
It is. It is. It's wonderful to see the change. It's wonderful to see them grow up. It's a bit like having an extended family. And then when our workers attend their graduation ceremonies and take photographs, and it's just a delight when they get apprenticeships that they never thought they could get. For them, that's a major goal. It's a breakthrough. And we assist that. We've assisted them through COVID even. We had some funding whereby we could help young people get part-time and full-time work. And we had the funds at that time from 19 to 21 to invest in them for, say, a short barista course or first aid course or driving lessons, all those essentials, because they don't have a mature adult in their life to teach them how to drive.
Right.
Right. And we don't want people on the roads without a license. We're doing the community a good service, making sure they know how to drive properly and safely. So we have those sorts of short courses. They all add up. They're like stepping stones. So if you can put on your resume at 16 or 17 that I've done first aid, that I've done, well, obviously that involves resuscitation, and I've done surf life saving, yeah, and all these responsible things. That I've done a barista course. I mean, how many people do you know got themselves through uni just making coffee?
Right?
Right?
Lots.
Making coffee is important.
Yes.
It keeps the world turning. We need our coffee, right? And so if we can give these kids a coffee course, it might be 2 days of intensive learning and training, and then they go practice, and they're a barista, and it says so on their resume. That's important. It gives them a stepping stone. They're all little things that all add up, and we must never, ever, ever take those for granted. They're big achievements for kids that have never had achievement in their life, or they don't have mature adults in their life that had achievement too, you know?
Yeah, that's so cool. And like the skills, like our middle son wasn't quite sure what to do, and he started working at a grocery store, and the opportunity to learn to cut meat. And I said, "Oh, you should take that immediately. Like that's a skill that transfers anywhere. Name a place where you would live where people don't eat meat. Like unless you move to a vegan commune, you're gonna have it. You could get a job anywhere because
Yeah.
most people don't know how to cut meat or break down an animal into retail cuts of meat, and he does. And so it's one of those things. But there again, he's got me and his mother to talk to provide guidance, to bounce ideas off of,
Give
and
encouragement.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you're providing that for these kids that have never had it before. And what a
Yeah.
cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think encouragement is one of the biggest things we can do for our children and for our friends. If they know that you're an encourager, it's amazing the difference it makes.
Yeah. And then you also wrote a book called Second Chances. What made you write the book?
Yeah. Well, it was like I knew my husband's story hadn't, the second half, his second chance, that story hadn't been written. Like the headlines in the 70s were all about this, 40-year-old who was a fool, an idiot who took a one-way ticket to Rio, okay? Totally irresponsible, stain on society, all that stuff. He was bad, bad, bad.
Yeah.
And the man I never wanted to meet, the man I never wanted to like. But when we got together and he had his second chance, he wasn't interested in the things of this world. He just he had so much empathy for anyone who'd been through the criminal justice system. And so I knew that story had to be told, apart from which we'd moved state. So it's a big thing, especially for me. I'm a Sydney girl at heart, and I came to Adelaide kicking and screaming. Now, I've been here 40 years, and I can tell you that because my baby, I was 7 months pregnant, driving the truck with all the furniture in it. And my 7 months in the womb baby then is now 40 today. So I've been 40 years in South Australia. And in that time, basically, Jeff and I worked relentlessly to influence positively lives caught up in the criminal justice system, to give them hope for a future, to believe that people could believe in them when they didn't have any belief or self-belief for that matter, so that they could move forward and make good decisions for their lives. Everybody needs hope. And so my husband dedicated his life to the system, into those lives in the system. And that story hadn't been told. Jeff Glanville, well, actually, the police only ever knew him according to his birth certificate, which is Richard Jeffrey Stewart Glanville. And so they were ringing around any Glanville in Sydney saying, "Is Richard there?" And they would know, well, nobody calls him Richard. Even his mother didn't call him Richard. It was just what was on his birth certificate, right? So they knew it was either the media or the cops. The cops didn't find him for 6 months. Now, whatever happened to Richard Glanville, given he was headlines in the 70s, I thought that story had to be told, that the second half of his life was the best half of his life. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
And and that I thought was important. And also threading throughout every chapter, at the beginning of every chapter, we deliberately chose a quote about forgiveness, how significant forgiveness is, because you don't get a second chance without somebody forgiving you. You
Hmm.
know, if you screw up, you know that your wife or whoever you offended is going to need to forgive you for you to move on. We all need that. And we forgave each other for certain things. And we made sure that anger didn't go down with us when we went to bed at night. Do you know what I'm saying?
I
And
do.
so we were quoting Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi. You pick anybody, even Kevin Costner, would you believe? He has a quote on forgiveness. God love him. So, you know, uh, he forgiveness is key. Now, of course, we ended up in the final chapter quoting Jesus himself. He was the one who on the cross turned to the thief and said, "You're going to be with me in paradise." He asked for forgiveness, right? Just like that, as simple as that. And he said 70 times 7. Well, who the heck could ever forgive anybody 70 times 7? Do you know what I mean? So what is the
Hmm.
message? The message is you can't count the number of times you need to forgive. But the advantage and the best thing about forgiveness is I'm not carrying the burden of resentment. I'm not harboring a grudge. I'm not becoming mean and nasty. I'm not becoming all bad and bitter. Oh, I'll never forgive him. You
Right.
know? And there are people around that talk like that. I'll never forgive. There's no way I'm going to forgive. And I think that's a very bad place to be, because that means you're harboring, basically taking poison and hoping it helps the situation. And it doesn't. We've got to let go. We've got to move on. And you can only do that through forgiveness.
Yeah, that's what people don't understand about forgiveness, at least from my perspective, is that it's not for the other person. It's actually for you. It's
Correct.
actually for yourself. It's got
You
really
got
very
it.
little, yeah, very little to do with the other person.
You preach
And
it, brother.
well, like I've never been a grudge holder, and
Yeah.
um, like it sounds crazy, but like even the worst kind of the worst things people do, the less it matters to me because the way I think about it is why do I want to give that low value or low quality person who made those decisions that much time and energy out of my life? They don't deserve my time and energy. Like I'm not wasting it on them. Whatever it is, it is. Whatever has happened has happened. We've
Yeah.
got to move forward now in the new world, post whatever the issue is, and live the best life that we can. Like that's the way I think about it, and
Yeah.
it's very freeing to be able to just shed that stuff and move forward.
Yeah. Well, you understand what life is all about when you actually describe it as a character development program.
Mm,
And everything that happens to us, even if it's sandpaper, you need to thank the person for being the sandpaper because it made you a better person.
hmm.
And I know that sounds weird, but in some ways, marriage is about character development because you have to learn how to love through all the imperfections and idiosyncrasies and and navigate your way through. And you need to modify as you go. You need to be pragmatic and still love, because you're developing, she's developing, I'm developing, because it is one big life is a character development program. You come into this world with nothing, you go out with nothing except for the character that's been developed in you and the love that you've carried and given away.
That's right. You leave that behind in all these relationships with the people who you've interacted with. It's one of my favorite movies. Is It's a Wonderful Life. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie or not. It's an old Jimmy Stewart movie, the Christmas
Oh,
movie.
well, I must, yes, I think I did once, long time ago.
Yeah. So the premise of the movie is he winds up in a bad spot and he's thinking about killing himself. And a guardian angel comes down and gives him the gift of showing him what life would have been like if he'd never lived. and all of the people that he'd interacted with. Like he saved his brother from drowning when he was 9, and he goes back and his brother died at 9 because he wasn't there to save him. And his wife that he'd built a great family with and a great home was the library. This was a 30s movie. So she was an old spinster. She was an old maid, and she was closing up the library, and she doesn't recognize him. And that's it for him. He's like, no, it can't be. And then he goes back to his real life, and all of a sudden he doesn't care about this terrible situation that he's in because he realizes it doesn't matter. And that's to me, I'm fortunate that even as a kid, I've never chased the material things. I've never cared about money. I've always placed a high emphasis on relationships and experiences. And I argue it's why I've got such good things in my life, because those are the things I care about. It's not an accident that I married an awesome lady. It's not an accident that I've been with her for 30 plus years. It's not an accident that my kids all still love being around me and I have good relationships with them. That's from showing up every day. And anyone can do it. You just got to decide to do it. Like
Yeah.
it sounds basic, but it's really that basic, you know?
Yeah. Yes, and love is the key.
Yeah.
Love is the key it's the glue that holds the family together through thick and thin. And that was our 42 and a half years of marriage as well. And they say that there's two deaths. Firstly, there's the physical death, and the second death is when we stop talking about the person we love. And through this podcast and through my book, I've been able to continue talking about my husband who passed 3.5 years ago because he taught me so much. You know, some people might have criticized, oh, he was 20 years older than you. Yeah, but he was my mentor. He was my teacher. He was the one who encouraged me to go on to further studies, which I did. I got my master's in business administration. Now, our kids were young. That wouldn't have happened without his support. He pushed me. He encouraged me. And I think that all those things that we learn in life, they have to be remembered and cherished, you know. Now, I'm not too fussed about anybody's age difference in marriage. It's really the soul and the minds meeting. That's what matters, and that they are fully aligned, as we discussed earlier. And when they're aligned, magic happens. And you can achieve things. You can make decisions together and be a team. And that's what we were. We were committed. We worked together. We holidayed together. We slept together. We shopped together. There wasn't anything that we didn't do together. And we made babies together. You know, we raised boys together. All of that. It was a beautiful time. And so on his deathbed, I asked him, I said, honey, did we have a good life together? And he was facing away from me, struggling to breathe, but he mustered up all the energy he could, and he rolled over towards me, and he just said one word. He said, wonderful. So that word is very precious to me. That was his last word to me that we did. I knew the answer. I knew but the fact that he mustered up all that energy, and that was only a day before he passed. He passed the following evening. Essentially, towards the end, his body was falling apart. You know, he was 86 with prostate cancer. He'd chosen deliberately not to have chemotherapy because he knew he'd lose quality of life. And he had gorgeous hair. His hair was amazing. He had a full crop right to the end, and it wasn't grey. He had nice little mature grey down the side, but he had a full crop of hair. And so when the oncologist said, oh, we've booked you in to have chemo, he said, no, you haven't. And he said, what do you mean? Well, you know, you've got to have chemo. He said, no, I don't. I'm not having it. I don't want to lose my hair. And I think that actually gave him extra years. He did a trial drug, but otherwise I had him pumped with all these, you know, natural therapies, and I think he benefited from those. And it was only the last year really that in 9 months, I was his carer. But he passed well in that sense that he was surrounded by love and we had the strength to let him go.
Yeah, that's so important. And I love the way you talked about that because I explain it to people. I want to be alive as long as I'm living. And there's a difference between being alive and living. I don't want to exist. I
No.
don't want to, hang on for 5 or 6 years and not be able to experience life and in poor health and all of those things. I love how you just described the choices that you and Jeff made and how you kind of work together to extend those years for as many of them as you could. And
Yeah.
that's got to be such a rewarding feeling for you that you made those choices and were able to do that together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what type of feedback have you gotten from, have people talked to you after they've read the book? Have they written you notes? What type of
Oh,
feedback have you heard from
yes, yes,
folks?
yes, yes. I've had at least 7 written reviews. We've actually been pumping them up onto social media, one a week. One guy said, "Look, I was thinking about Christopher Skase because in our country, Christopher Skase was a bad, bad man who
Mm,
siphoned off millions. He was the white collar guy of the 80s." And he said, "You look at Christopher Skase, and he left a bad legacy. You look at Jeff Glanville, and he left a beautiful legacy."
mm.
And so that's one of the reviews. And the others are just coming in every week. As I said, we've got 7 so far, and it's encouraging because it really says the book was worth it. Um, to share the ups, the downs, the challenges that we came through. I think our strength was in being together. We had a lot of opposition to our marriage, yes, but then we had opposition from within the organisation. That's why we decoupled from a Melbourne based organisation to form our own charity 10 years ago in South Australia exclusively. As a Sydney girl, I had trouble bowing down to Melbourne.
I love it.
Uh, and also, as the CEO, I was I was the executive director in a national outfit, right? But I was the only girl on the playing field.
Mm.
And when it came to fundraising, we were punching above our weight as a state, and we were good at it. Uh, who knows? You don't know sometimes if the green eyed monster comes out. You just don't know.
So
Um,
true. Yes.
but I've been kicked out of a state, kicked out of a job, and kicked out of where else was I kicked out? Kicked out of a job, kicked out of a state. Oh, yeah, I was kicked out of a church because of the green eyed monster. So that was all part of my character development program, I have to say, because nothing was logical. Nothing was logical. Nothing is logical about
No,
jealousy.
that's right.
There's nothing logical. You can't nail it. You can't express it. It's just, ugh. So it's a very powerful emotion. It's indescribable, but you know it. You know it when you're the target. You think, oh, here we go. Here we go. Woo. But,
Well,
you've got to overcome.
yeah, what's funny, Helen, is I when I think about criticism or people that have been critics of me, I can't think of a single person that's criticized me or taken shots at me that's doing more than I'm doing. It's always someone who is on the sideline or not participating at the same level that I am that's
Yeah.
taking shots. People that like run businesses or work in charitable organizations or whatever, they're too busy doing stuff to care about the other stuff. It's the hangers on that are taking the shots at you. And I learned long ago to pay almost no attention to those people because they're only doing it to try to make themselves feel better about something going on in their life. I don't judge them. I just move forward and keep doing what I'm doing. But that can be hard sometimes, especially
Yeah.
when they're loud and vocal.
And they're not the people that you would go to for advice.
Mm-hmm.
And mostly their advice is completely unsolicited. So if you get unsolicited advice, it's good to know that you don't have to accept it because you didn't pay for it.
I'm
You
gonna
didn't
say
ask for
it's generally worth what you paid for it. That type of advice,
it. Yeah, exactly. It's good. Good.
for sure. So before I let you go, I wanted to talk about your experience with the bushfires because you guys were caught up in those terrible 2019, 2020 bushfires and like your
Yeah.
house was gone. How did that whole thing transpire? Did you know it was coming? What walk us through kind of how that took place?
Right. It took us by absolute surprise. So the Friday was the fifth day of an extraordinary heat wave. Every day was pushing up. We talk in Celsius here. You
Yep.
talk in Fahrenheit. But we're talking over 40, close to 44, 45 degrees Celsius. And so that was 5 days in a row. And every morning we would get up. We actually wake up. We'd be lying together and we'd pray, Lord, protect our home, because he had done it before. It had
Mm.
come pretty close before. And that day, on the Friday, we didn't feel in any way to take valuable documents or photographs, or we didn't feel that. We didn't feel that the winds were going our way, which they weren't. So we drove out our 200 meter. We're in the middle of 25 acres. We drove out the driveway in the same shorts. My husband was wearing shorts, a shirt, and shoes, and my dress. And that was all we ended up having that night. Because in the evening, suddenly, these disastrous winds did an almighty turnaround. Now, all day, they were heading south. They were on the Adelaide Hills. We were in the northern part, and it was going south, down to Lobethal, down to Woodside, down to Oakbank, down to Balhanna. And we would be watching the screen at work for the updates from the CFS, that's the Country Fire Service.
Mm.
And we would see, oh, good, somebody else's problem, somebody else's property. It's not our property. That's a pretty nasty sort of attitude to have, isn't it? Anyhow, it wasn't us. We were okay. We're off the hook, going south. That's the way we wanted it all day. And then suddenly it sent all the first responders into a total spin because all their resources had been going out for 5 days straight. And all these fire trucks were coming in from all over the place, but they were all going south, and that's where they were. And then when the winds turned in the evening, we were out with friends. It was at a place where they, on Friday night, served oysters, and we like oysters. So it was a special, and we were enjoying them with friends. And then the phone call came. Helen, we've been told to evacuate. We're evacuating. I thought, oh, okay, well, there's nothing I can do. And by the way, you can't get up here. The police won't let you. There's no access. The police are not letting you in. So we rang our son and said, honey, do you mind if we stay with you tonight? Because he had an upstairs, downstairs, and, it's like an apartment downstairs, except for no kitchen. But anyhow, that's what we did. We stayed the night. And then the next morning, I got a phone call from a neighbour who walked around the block. She said, Helen, has anyone told you? I said, told me what? Well, your house is gone. Your hay shed's gone. Everything is gone. I said, what? She said, yes. She said, it's just smouldering. So we didn't have any ground cover, nor do we have air cover. You've got, I think, Elvis that has a belly full of water that flies over and dumps water on your fires. Well,
Yeah.
we had Elvis a few years ago, but there was no air cover or ground cover. I think they just run out. I think they were just sent in so many different directions. There was nothing left for us by the Friday night. And so we were not allowed to even see our property until 2 days later. and we went there on the Sunday and we couldn't find our cattle. All the feed had been burnt, like both paddocks. We had a 10 acre paddock on the north, 10 on the south, and all that hay had just recently been cut. So it was all burnt and there was no feed. The hay had gone. They had the cattle, 7 of them, had just wandered down the road and found somebody else's green grass and somebody else's, you know, um, dam. And that's what they did. They just stayed there. And we found out from a neighbour that that's where they were. Strangely, our cattle yards were intact. And strangely, we had a ramp, a cattle ramp. I don't know if you know much about cattle, but cattle need a ramp to get up into the truck, right?
Yep. Yep.
Well, the ramp was made of sleepers, big, fat wooden sleepers.
Mm-hmm.
They were untouched. The flames were so fast, they just jumped the wooden sleepers and they jumped the 2 plastic wheelie bins that had our rubbish in them out the front. They didn't melt. They were just jumped. That's how fast it was going. So when we sold the property, we could sell it with functional cattle yards. Amazing. So it took us a while to get through the shock of
Right.
losing
Yeah.
everything. You know, my husband already had lost everything before. This was a different way. This was his second life, his second wife. This was our 32 years of working hard. We worked very hard on that property on the weekends, you know. It was our getaway. It was our little nest, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And I was good with the chainsaw for firewood for winter. I just loved that. I found it therapeutic. And we did that together, you know, for safety reasons. We were together with the chainsaw. And so all the wood that I had chopped up, ready for the winter, was gone. It was all gone. He had French marble clocks as family heirlooms, and they were destroyed. He had beautiful portraits of his forebears from Cornwall. They were destroyed. And of course, all the photographs that you can imagine from my childhood, his childhood, all the way through, raising the boys, holidays, wedding, all those momentous occasions, I hadn't put them up digitally. And so the only real photographs that we had of our property were those that I'd put up on Facebook or Facebook memories or
Mm.
on my mobile. So it took us, I suppose, a few months to come to terms with the fact we had lost everything and we were needing to start again. And I can only be thankful for the fact that I had meaningful activity. I had staff I was responsible for, and there was no way I was going to stay at home and mope. So we took ourselves together to go back to the office, and strangely, that is where the insurance policy was kept.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
No, no. And interestingly, our passports were on us. So
Huh.
our passports were on us because we were going through an ID process with the department for new updated uh, uh, identification with the department. And then my husband went to his office and looked at his documents, and there was the insurance policy. So what happened the day before, we could phone the insurance company and start the procedure straight away. But we didn't lose a home. We lost a lifestyle.
Right.
Uh, we lost the beauty of driving through these beautiful eucalyptus gums and with the rain, smelling the fresh air. There were so many aspects. The property was so beautiful. As soon as I saw it back in the later 80s, 88, I don't tell many people this story, but I really did hear a voice, and I believe it was God saying, "This is your piece of Australia." So I turned to Jeff and I said, "We're going to buy this." He said, "What are you talking about?" He said, we've got no money. I said, oh, that's irrelevant. We're going to buy this. Just going to buy it, you know. And so I said, let's go to the real estate agent and make an offer. And he said, you're kidding. I said, no, 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 this is ours. I know it's ours. So off we go to the real estate agent and we made an offer, which was accepted. We still had no money. But here in South Australia, you can set your settlement date 3 months out. So we did. So we saw it in the January, like New Year's Day, January, yeah? And 3 months later, in March, that was the settlement date. And we looked at each other and said, well, now we've got to find the deposit. So we went to the bank and we said to the bank, how much do you need? And they said, oh, you're going to need $12,000. Oh, okay. So we didn't eat. We didn't go out. We didn't do anything much. I have no idea how we got that $12,000 together, but we got it in 3 months. So that's probably a rate of $1,000 a week, you know. And we mustered it up and we gave it to the bank and the bank did the rest, and that was our land. And then Jeff needed some surgery. He had double inguinal hernias. He needed to recuperate. He just needed to rest. He said, because we'd put a shed there. We lined a shed, 30-foot by 20-foot shed in the corner. And it had a little bio-loo and it had down pipes for rainwater and stuff. It was cute. It was real cute. I loved living there. It was simple, very simple. And anyhow, he said, I'm going to recuperate in the shed. And I said, well, you're not going without me. So we lived there, and that's the start of living in our little corner. And then his aunt died later, a few years later, and we were able to then start building the home. And it was a very beautiful season in our life, watching your home grow. Yeah.
Yeah, but awesome memories, lovely property, but so shocking how your life can just change overnight. Like literally, just boom, things are different.
Well, boom, boom, you're right. Because on the Sunday when we were going up the path for 200 meters, I took a call from my baby, my 6'3" baby son, who was in India at the time. He'd been notified by his older brother that what had happened, because that's where they were raised. That was their memories too. Everything about that property was about the four of us. And he rang me from India and he said, Mum, I know you don't want to hear this now, but I want you to know I have a feeling that this fire is going to be a turning point for good. I'm thinking, far out. I know I didn't really want to hear that. But he said, Mama, I just think it's going to be a good thing. And then he preached at me. He said, well, Mum, of all people, you know you can't take anything with you. And I said, yeah, that's right. It's true. We don't put our faith or our trust in things. And so that was the beginning of my walk towards the devastation. And the book shows the photographs of how devastating it was, like the before and the after shots. Beautiful home, red roof, typical homestead. In South Australia, there was these beautiful wooden turned posts with lacework corners. Very beautiful, very, very beautiful. And we designed all that. But it was a season. My husband was already diagnosed. He was unwell. And so then we realized we had to downsize. And that's what basically we've been doing for 5 years, except unfortunately the building of the apartment where I'm closer to the city in Adelaide took longer than we'd hoped, and he was never able to make it to the apartment from which I'm speaking to you. This is a new chapter. His ashes are actually in a reserve across the road. There's a tree there, and we chose the tree before I moved in. My boys said, Mum, this is your future. How about we put some of Dad at the base of this tree? And so that's what we've done. Yeah, so I can see.
Oh, that's nice. So you're close. You can go visit.
Yeah. Nobody knows that. Like you can't put a plaque up, you can't put a tombstone. You just know he's there, you know.
No, for sure. But that's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I ask all sorts of questions. We cover all sorts of territory. I don't want to miss anything good just because I didn't ask the right questions. So, is there anything I haven't asked you about, or anything we haven't talked about that you feel strongly about that you want to talk about while we're in front of the audience? And before you answer, we definitely have to have you back on somewhere down the road because there's more stuff for us to talk about outside of your book and your experiences. And so
Wow.
we'll get that set up somewhere down the road. But
Oh, that could
for
be fun.
yeah,
Oh,
we'll have a good time on that one. On this episode, on this appearance, is there anything we haven't covered that you feel strongly about that you want to talk about while we're here?
I don't think so. I think that the essence of the book we've already, mentioned. I think that if I could in any way help people understand how important it is for them to forgive anyone who's offended, even no matter how difficult it is. You might even have to ask for help from above to do it, but you're
Mm,
going to have to do it because it's healthy. We carry in our bodies resentment. We carry in our bodies unforgiveness. Our body is affected by all those negative things. And there are theories that speak strongly about how some cancers are actually because we've harbored unforgiveness and resentment. And it's backfired onto our major organs. And we can't afford to have it. We just, if we were to cleanse ourselves of all these negative thoughts and the harboring of resentment and unforgiveness, if I could influence one person to reconsider and do basically a forgiveness audit. Have I forgiven that nasty auntie? Have I forgiven my son for disrespecting or whatever the issue was? I'll tell you now, in the book, I talk about a family and a husband and wife who came to the point of forgiving the man who killed their 3 children.
mm,
He was drunk. That's all he lived for every weekend was to drink. He knew nothing else. And the father has actually been recognized by the Pope and he and the wife were invited to Rome because they made a decision as difficult. I don't know if I could even do that. As
yeah.
difficult as it was. Imagine your 3 children mowed down by a drunken driver. The children were on the footpath. The children were given pocket money by dad to go to the local store to buy ice cream. It was summer. I've met this man. He just radiates a peace. In fact, I got goosebumps talking to you about it.
Mm,
It's a peace that is indescribable. He clearly did something that he knew he needed to do because he didn't want to harbor. He knew that his children were good. They knew where that his children were, that they were in a better place. He loved them so much. He kind of, and now it's become a very special um, piece on Channel 9, Spotlight it's called, where the cameras went into the prison to meet both the perpetrator and the victim, where they met, where they took communion together, where they
wow.
did victim offender reconciliation, and and this man who knew nothing else about life except getting drunk every weekend, he's now got hope for a future. He knows he's going to be in for another 20 years, of course. He said, I did the crime. I have to be here. But the father of the children has visited him. And would you believe that man rings the family once a week and they recognize his calls and they welcome him. And I tell you, it has really challenged the journalists. The journalists couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
But this guy made a decision to forgive.
Man.
Unreal.
Yeah, that's such a powerful message to end on. And I really appreciate both you talking about it and sharing that story as such a shining example of I can't think of anything worse in the world than losing one of your kids. Like, I think it's the worst possible experience you could have. It's worse than anything I can think of.
That's
And
right.
for someone to have the capacity to forgive a person for that, that the rest of us need to learn from that and
Yeah,
keep it front of mind and embody that in our lives. So thanks again, Helen. Really appreciate
no
it. Looking
problem.
forward to the next one.
We'll send you the photo as soon as you ask for it. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Sweet. Okay.
All right.
Thanks
Have a
again.
great weekend.
You too. Bye.
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 Okay, guys, there we go. So, absolutely loved our conversation with Helen, loved hearing her story, and obvious that she had just a great relationship with her husband before he passed, but they got a long and happy life together. Love the work that she's doing in Australia. Love the work that she's doing, encouraging people to give others second chances, to make better choices, and helping them with the resources and training and education so they can learn how to make better choices. So we'll have the link to her book, which as you heard her tell us, you can only buy it off her website, and we'll have that down in the show notes as well. And then we will have Helen back on because she is really well versed in religion, and I'd love to have a conversation with her about religion and how she thinks about it and how she talks about it with other people. So really loved having her on, and really appreciate we got that time with her. You'll see her again somewhere down the road. So look, James puts it up right over here every day. Head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. Links to our social media accounts are available there. We publish a newsletter every weekday you can subscribe to on our website. Make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe to our podcast, whatever platform you consume it on. We keep finding awesome guests. We keep having them share all of these great lessons that they've learned that you can incorporate into your life so you can build a life of meaning and purpose and truly be fulfilled and happy with what you're doing. You don't want to miss all that stuff because it's awesome. It's going to help you. Make sure you catch our next episode. We'll see you there.